All right. What's up, people? Hope everybody is well. Welcome back to the Onyx Report. We are getting it in this week. You ain't know, but it's good to have you back. It's been a busy one. Yesterday was actually my last day of teaching for the semester, so I think I'm a bit exhausted, but in a good way. So it's all good. But welcome to the Onyx Report, right? This is where we as Black male justice advocates advocate for Black boys and men using critical analysis. We're going to continue to do that. That is what we are into. So as people are coming in the door, I know I didn't advertise this one until pretty late, but as I said, it's been a kind of crazy last couple of days. So I got students reaching out to me trying to haggle for grades at this point. Finals are next week, and quite a bit of grading to do. So it is what it is, but at least for a few days, I'm kind of getting my bearings. I'm gonna let people come in before we jump in, get it going. All right. So in the meantime, we will take care of some business. Let me, as usual, shout out my members on YouTube and Patreon. So let me pay them some due credit and check them out. All right. So thank you to my subscribers. And just so I can get to a little bit of that, if you are interested in subscribing, well, please make sure you like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. And by join, I mean become a member of the Onyx Report, or the Onyx Report Brotherhood, that is. You can do that on YouTube right next to the subscribe button. What's up, Malika? Thank you for that. And you can go ahead and choose the level of membership you're interested in, all the way from gold to black opal, and they each come with different perks, as well as being able to attend the after show we have every Wednesday after our live broadcast on YouTube. But also you can go through Patreon and become a supporter along those lines as well. We have a film review series we do there, as well as you can support the Institute for Black Male Studies, become a monthly contributor. So check all of those out and hopefully support what we're doing. Now, to those who are coming into the comments, usually don't see as many Facebook, but I think that has to do with StreamYard. But either way, what's up, Blake? What's up, Kalila? How you doing? Hope you're well. Proud to be a simp. What's going on? Excalibur, Ron, Tiffany, thank y'all for coming through. Carl, what's going on? So we're going to dive right in. And this week, we only have a couple things that we're going to mention before we get to the main gist of the program. Right? Sir Anthony, Mr. Wusa, what's up? Let's see. All right. Get this in here. So y'all know that the way we do it over here is that we celebrate Black men. And we celebrate Black men with our Sacred Black Masculine series. And basically what that is we acknowledge brothers who have done something, Black males of any age who've done something of significance. And this is fairly organic. I kind of treat it based on what comes to me. So if I don't do it in a given week, or I don't mention something that you know about, it's not because I'm making a judgment. It's probably because it just hasn't run across my desk. But anytime you find some positivity, something brothers are doing, please make sure you shoot it to me. And you can go to thasanjohnson.com and you can email me through there and send me a link. Let me know, and I will definitely shout it out if it definitely presents brothers in the right light. Highlighting what Black men and boys are doing. And speaking of which, I want to shout this young man out right here. You can find this particular piece on www.ksdk.com. Title reads, "Student wins scholarship, then uses savings to help another student go to college." This is dated May 4th, so this is very recent. Right? When Joshua Nelson had been saving for college, but when he earned a scholarship, he decided to use his savings to help another student go to college. He says, "I plan to go to Southeast Missouri State and go into their pre-optometry program. I'll be majoring in biomedical sciences." What Josh didn't say is that SEMO offered him a scholarship. That will happen when you're an excellent student, a 3-year varsity basketball player, and president of the school's Multicultural Achievement Committee. Josh saved up more than $1,000 for college, but since he earned a scholarship, he's decided to use his savings to help another student go to college. Over the next few weeks, with some help from his parents and teachers, he'll be accepting applications for this special scholarship with the hope that some donors will help the $1,000 multiply. Right? Okay. So if you'd like to donate electronically to the Joshua Nelson Scholarship in Action Scholarship Fund, you can go to maxscholarsscw.weebly.com/donations.html, or you can donate by, So you can donate to the scholarship fund via check or money order and make it payable to St. Charles West High School. Please also write in the lower left-hand corner, JN Scholarship. And you can mail your donation to St. Charles West High School. Attention, Yolanda Curry, 3601 DROSTE Road, Drost Road, St. Charles, Missouri, area code zip code 63301. All right. So shout out to this young man for definitely extending his efforts to help others. That's what's up. Commendable as it is. Because I don't know, when I was 17, if I had $1,000 and I realized that I had a scholarship, I probably would have bought a whole bunch of stuff. So shout out to him for actually thinking about others. Right. All right. So we got our special shout outs that we're going to go ahead and do this week. And there's one in particular, a little off topic, but nonetheless relevant. And that is to this gentleman here. Some of you who are Black media nuts like myself might know who this brother is. Shout out to one Roscoe Lee Brown. Born May 2nd, 1922, and passed away April 11th, 2007. This brother's incredible. If you haven't become familiar with his work, and he has work for every generation. I mean, this brother was born in 1922, but we are celebrating his birthday. And because I am a fan of his work, I have to. I first saw him in Uptown Saturday Night when I was a kid. I saw him in The Cosby Show. He became the voice of Kingpin in one of the Spider-Man series. He's been all over the place. He was in The Proud Family. He was even in Epic Movie in 2007. He's been doing all kinds of stuff. Will and Grace, Law and Order. He was in the film Treasure Planet. He's been in everything. This brother has had a prolific career. He was in ER. He played in Babe in the Big City. Of course, Spider-Man, the animated series. His voice is tremendous. I mean, he is up there with Morgan Freeman and Keith David, a number of my favorite voice artists. And it's incredible. Appreciate that support, Timothy. So check him out. If you're not familiar, you can go to imdb.com and look at him there. He was in A Different World. I mean, his resume is ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. He is one of our gems and an acting icon. So to Roscoe Lee Brown, I just wanted to say happy birthday from the Onyx Report. And we are so glad that we've gotten to enjoy your talents over the years. MLR, appreciate the Cash App support. All right. Brother Lawrence, good to see you in here. Let's see. Hi, Scholar. What's happening? See a few people slid in. So we just want to acknowledge that. Trouble Man, what's going on? Newstel, what's up? Art, what's going on? Sir Anthony, all right? Jamila, what's happening? Got a few people in here doing it. So let me see here. Let me get this going here. Now, remember, you can go to the Institute for BlackMaleStudies.com. You can support in a whole nother way, and that is to purchase merchandise through the site. You can go to the site, click on merchandise, and see a number of things we have there: shirts, jackets, hats, the whole deal. You can support along those lines. And if you click on store, you can actually see a number of free lectures, as well as we have classes and webinars available to you that you can partake in at your speed when you are ready. We got 97 in the building. Please, again, like, share, subscribe, join, and donate to support the channel. And let us get it in. So y'all know the deal. Today we're dealing with this question of, is Black masculinism just Black feminism in reverse? And where does this come from? Well, I've actually heard this accusation for some years now. Now, I developed the concept of Black masculinism several years ago. And then when I came into doing some work formally in Black male studies, it was one of my contributions to the early discourse as we began to develop the field, right? And basically what we try to do with it is to use empirical data and accurate historical analysis to articulate Black male narratives in ways that subvert, non-empirical, often fictional accounts of Black males and what we stand for, what we've done, what we've experienced, and, what we think about it. I try to challenge those things with accurate information. And that's roughly what Black masculinism stands for. But recently, I was having an exchange on Facebook. I noticed, and this tends to happen, you get detractors that want to come in and argue. And this ends up being one of the things they kind of lob at you. Well, this is no different than Black feminism. You guys are just the same thing. It's like, no, if you come in with disrespect and you start fighting with people, you probably going to get, appreciate that, Xavier. You're probably going to get some passion right back at you, but we tend to keep it empirical, right? And on my page, I don't allow name calling or any of that. We get to the point. You make an argument, back the argument up with data, provide a link. If the argument is based on feelings or based on an assertion, that's fine, but just say so. And we go from there. But we try to keep it, professional, and we try to focus on data. And people, want to argue for a variety of reasons. But in that particular discussion, there were a couple of Black masculinists in there. Shout out to David McTowell. And we were talking explicitly about Black male reproductive rights. And this is not a phrase that most people have ever really heard of. But we're fundamentally talking about, and this is something that really applies to men in general, but there are elements of it that are specific to African American history, especially as it relates to Black men. But nevertheless, we were talking about the options or lack thereof for Black men. And in terms of reproductive, or pharmaceutical birth control methods, we were talking about how, for the most part, men have the same methods they've had for the last 70 years, right? All of the development in this area has principally been for women. From the pill onward, women have a variety of ways where they can determine the outcome of sex in regard to reproduction by using instruments, using pharmaceuticals that from before, during, or after the sex act give them an extraordinary amount of control over their bodies. And the argument that I have people extend back when I point out how vulnerable men are in terms of reproduction is, well, they should have just kept it in their pants. Now, this is a very dismissive attitude, which is also the case when you get this argument that Black masculinism is just Black feminism. It's a dismissive gesture that they use to avoid dealing with the argument itself. That's the first thing. And when you hear things like, especially if you're talking about reproductive rights, he should have kept it in his pants, that too is deflective and it's disingenuous in an argument, really. But when you really get to the core of it, these are the same things they used to say to women before the pill. When a girl would get pregnant at 15 and wanted to go to college and become a doctor and had to become a housewife because it was either that or use a clothes hanger, people would actually say, well, she should have kept her legs closed. So now that men are vulnerable in this area, you'll readily hear feminists make arguments like that. Well, he should have just kept it in his pants, which is ironic at best, because now you're dealing with the same type of vulnerability. And instead of actually having any kind of compassion, the way feminists were asking for decades ago, they respond the same way, right? So we were having a conversation about that, and we were trying to deal with it. And of course, Kevin Samuels is right. Ultimately, what you end up dealing with more often than not is sign language, right? And if you're not familiar, what does he call sign language? Shame, insult, guilt, and the need to be right. And then multiple times, appreciate that, Michael, that support, thank you. But multiple times, you'll find people attempting to do just that, right? They'll try to shame you, they'll try to guilt you, they'll insult you at one point, and that's one of the things that happened as well in the discussion. Got to the point where you had, people just mocking the argument. But this is real. This is real. Just as in the 50s, you got a 15-year-old girl that is experimenting with sex and has to pay for it for the rest of her life. You have a 15-year-old boy who can have sex for the first time, and now his entire future is in the hands of just whoever he was with. And instead of acknowledging the kinds of structural issues at play that give her an extraordinary amount of power and make him extraordinarily vulnerable, instead of acknowledging those dynamics, we just tell him to suck it up. So if she determines he needs to be a young father, or she determines not, it's all in her hands. And one of the things we talked about when we developed the Black male political agenda, one of the first issues up there in terms of reproductive rights is the financial abortion. We push for the option. Men should have the option. If it's her body, her choice, which we are completely cool with, he should be able to decide if he wants to be involved. Straight up. But to have that conversation, you got to have the issue taken seriously enough and the arguments being put on the table taken seriously enough to have a dialogue. And if you're just going back with somebody that just wants to argue or just wants to advocate for women and completely ignore the issues of boys and men, it's a disingenuous argument. So I rarely engage it unless there's an opportunity for others to learn from it, especially men, because I want men to be able to articulate these issues beyond just going back and forth. But I fundamentally also want to prepare you, brothers. If you engage in these arguments, you're really, more often than not, just dealing with somebody who wants to fight and wants to belittle and mock. Now, here's the thing. There were a couple people that came in the discussion, and they came in disrespectfully, and they were met with the same degree of passion that they came in with. And of course, they didn't like it. But there were a couple of people who came in with nothing but respect. And here's the thing. If you can come in with respect, even in disagreeing, we can agree to disagree. But if you come in with drama and disrespect, you're going to get ran out. So the reality is, if you want to have a discussion, if you want to deal with these issues, as long as you're willing to take them seriously enough to engage them, we can go there. Because there's really a lot to this. Men in and of themselves have been suffering this for quite a while, especially as long as the state has been looking to offset the expenses of taking care of families that need by putting them on to any man that they can. This has put men in a very vulnerable position. This is why you can be with a woman who has kids that obviously aren't yours, and you become financially responsible to them. She can hit you up for child support as far as family court is concerned, because the state is trying to offset these expenses on whomever they can, even if it isn't the biological father. And in many ways, this is a problem for men. Seriously is. And so we look to take it seriously. But in the midst of all of this, there was something else that happened, right? A friend of mine, who many of you are familiar with and who I love to have on my show as often as possible because I dig talking to him. I talk to him on air, off air. We'll talk till 3, 4 in the morning just because the brother's just that cool. And in that respect, I thought I'd invite him back as usual, and I'll have him on as often as he wants to. But all of you know, and if you don't, this is my boy, BGS. And I'm going to bring him in here to talk about something that occurred yesterday. What's up, man?
Hey, Doc. What's going on?
You, man. How you doing?
Pretty good.
All right. Colin, thanks for the Cash App support. Here's the thing. In the midst of thinking about all of this, you dropped a video.
Mm-hmm.
And you got a couple. I mean, there's, I got my top three. The Cynthia G Kick Rocks video, the video where you drop the gynocracy and explain what it is. I mean, you have videos that I was walking around in public stores cussing, listening to. You dropped another one yesterday, man. And this has now entered my top three, right? This is a powerful piece, and I want you guys to support it. I want to put the link in the comment section. It's short. He drops it. I almost played the whole thing. I damn near did. I said, but I forgot that I knew the brother, so I don't have to play the whole thing. I'll bring him in and we can talk about it. But I definitely want people to go check it out because he drops some hard truths, and whether you agree or disagree, they are truths that we need to reflect on. We need to actually, meditate on, because as Black men, you drop something about what we grapple with in relationships that few wanted to say. Do you want to give a bit of a synopsis of what you were talking about?
Okay. Okay. The title of the video was "They Don't Want Us," and it's not the fact that they don't need us around. They do. Okay, they need Black men around. They need Black men to marry, to have families with. Is because they have very few options. But the thing is, what I mean by they don't want us, we're not their first choice as a group. I'm not saying every Black woman is the same, and some Black women don't truly want a Black man first. But the thing is that as a group, we're really not their first choice. And feminists have said that there was a couple of feminists that even wrote in their books that the fact that white men won't marry them is the biggest effect of racism. Okay. So the thing is that if we've heard, God knows we've heard that on panels, in books, stuff like that, what Black men need to do to qualify to be with a Black woman. Okay. And if we can't qualify, jump over these series of hurdles, then we can't be with them. And I've asked, no other group, no matter how poor they are, has to go through that. There are no qualifications to be with their women, or be respected by their women, or be accepted by their women. And what really brought this on was a few things. One, there was a video asking the question, do Black men deserve respect? And that is a big thing going on especially on YouTube. You see it sprinkling here on Facebook. You see it sprinkling here on Twitter and in the feminist, the Black female blogs. Okay, about Black men not deserving of respect because they haven't done anything from get a job or get an education all the way up to conquering white supremacy. Okay. So and they say, well, unless we do these things, accomplish these things, then we as men are not deserving of respect, and we're lesser than. Right. And we're probably the only group of men probably on the planet that has that kind of request from their women, just to get basic respect. Basic level. Just basic level respect. And so I got to thinking that, I was actually reading a book called "Do Black Women Hate Black Men?" And there was a piece in there that was saying about which something we all know. Okay, as Black men, if you were raised in a family, even a 2-parent household, that if there's something that's going to be educated, a child's going to be educated, and there's a boy and a girl, the girl's going to get the nod first. Yeah. They're going to make sure she's educated. They're going to make sure she has everything she needs to go to school and be successful. Yeah. And in the piece, they said they leave the boy to figure it out for himself. Yes. Or do the best that he can. And in this book, he's saying is normally what happens is that the boy hits 18. He's got to find out, take it, as he says, take his chances. And he finds out his chances are in the street. Okay. And then we find out on the street that you have very little chance, or almost no chance of success. Right. Right. And that got me to thinking is that, okay, no other group of people does that to their men, to their males. And I got to thinking, why is that? And I said, the thing is that you really aren't wanted by them. Okay, you're tolerated. Okay, you're necessary, but you're not wanted. And they know it, you know, there's something that came to me, man. Like, you know, like you have a inspiration, and my anima said, you need to talk about this. I said, even though it's just an opinion, he said, it's not, you know, I said up front, it's just an opinion. There's no hardcore. I mean, there are facts behind it, but there's no really hardcore facts that are really in. I said, I was just offering an opinion as I see it. I've known that from all my relationships with my women. I was necessary, and they were quote unquote happy with me, but there was always something. There was always some kind of dissatisfaction with me from all of them, that, you know, trying to get them to cooperate, even sometimes if it was in their best interest. They just didn't want to cooperate. And that's another thing that Black women spit out, is that anywhere from submission at the highest level to even smiling on the street at a Black man was something like this. Like Kevin said, they felt put upon to smile at a Black man, to be friendly with a Black man, to talk nice. Like they always say, it's hard for Black women just to be nice to their own men. And that it came to the conclusion that said, okay, it's not that you're not worthy, it's that they don't really want you like that.
And this is something we can look at in terms of policy, you know, and that's you know, that's been my big push, and we've had 100 conversations about that. But the way in which policy can play a role in actually shaping behavior over generations, you know what I mean, in terms of that. So what I've heard described on here as a low boiling contempt for Black men, I know I've experienced. I know many men I've sat down with and talked to have experienced. I know men who are adversaries to the manosphere can still talk about having experiences with. I have brothers that write me under the table who are everything from, you know, men that work at grocery stores to brothers with doctorates to medical doctors that will write me under the table, send me emails and say, man, I've experienced this very thing. And it's so rampant, and yet interestingly, not something that we find a lot of people publicly discussing in certain circles, especially in academia. But this kind of low boiling contempt that many Black men can speak to.
And low level disrespect.
And low level disrespect. And one of the things we think about is, okay, well, what, you know, and especially in the 1980s, what men were told is that if you develop yourself to the degree where you can check boxes, you'll finally be loved. You'll finally be cared for. You'll finally be treated with respect. And check boxes means that you meet all of the criteria we've heard. And what's the criteria we've heard since the 1980s?
$100,000 a year, educated, have a degree as much as possible, at least a bachelor's. And if it's a PhD, then you're really on top. Your own house, your credit. I mean, the list goes on, but yeah, those are the boxes that they want you to check. And that's just the top side we can talk about. We're not talking about the sexual side.
Oh, you mean porn star level skill?
Porn star level skills, yes, sir.
Genetic gifts?
Yes, they would call spine chilling orgasms. Yes,
which is both a product of genetics and skill.
Skill, yes, which makes you a master concubine, as they say. You know, absolutely. the first half of the concuserve, right?
Appreciate that, Uru. Absolutely. You know, if you could bring that together and become really this magical Negro, which many of us have sought to become over the decades, the assertion was that you would then be paid with what others would consider a very basic level of respect, of even just niceness.
Yes.
What have we heard in the last few years as brothers have begun to communicate using social media in ways that we couldn't communicate in the 80s and the 90s? We started to compare notes. We started to share. And what you found was, more often than not, whether you were a street brother or whether you had advanced degrees, there was a similarity of experience in this area where it almost didn't matter what you achieved or what you didn't. There was still a base level of contempt. Appreciate that, Professor Conroe. Hope you're well. But this is the issue on the table. And I think what drew a lot of people to this area of this area of YouTube is just the realization that
Mm-hmm.
you know the accomplishments don't change anything, and then you get kind of dismissed because the accomplishments are considered materialistic, and
Mm-hmm.
but that's not why brothers did it. We
Mm-hmm.
were told, it was almost like an unspoken contract. If you can achieve these things, there would be a basic level of respect and love extended to you. And what brothers are figuring out is that doesn't change anything. So,
No, no, especially nowadays with with over the last year or so with the question of a high value man,
okay,
that checks these boxes and meets these criterias, and they're getting drugged through social media. That how dare you consider yourself special because you're a high value man, because you do check these boxes, you have jumped over all these hoops, and now the same people that set up the criteria, they're trying to drag you down.
Absolutely. So we get to, I want to get to a couple of things that you mentioned, because in this whole question of feminism and masculinism, what's the difference? I'm not interested in slandering women. I think what I'm interested in is getting to the core of how we got here. Right? And there are levels of it historically. And this is something you've talked about a lot in your work, that you had levels of it during slavery, you had levels of it during Reconstruction, the Great Migration, the World War II. There were degrees of this. I mean, one of the things we talked about when we got together and did Their Eyes Were Watching God. I mean, this is a book written in 1937. And you can see some of this contempt playing out. But,
yes,
my emphasis is really post 1960s, 1970s, where I think it went nuclear, especially by the time you hit the 80s. The 80s is when it was on the table. The 60s and 70s is really when it began to boil, it began to simmer. But, in terms of how we got here in your assessment, especially to the point where, and I quote, you made this statement in the video that I thought was profound. You said, where meanness is a dating strategy.
Yes.
How do we get, in your assessment, how do we get to this point where meanness is a dating strategy?
I think that does come from the slavery experience, that, to survive that environment between each other, you had to have a certain level of toughness. And I think, I think that when you develop a certain level of toughness, a certain level of talking to each other that way, that even in their eyes can watch in God, you can see the banter, the snarkiness, what we call snarkiness, back and forth, this them talking to each other, even the heavyweight teasing and the name calling, all the kind of stuff that was done back then, even if it was in jest, and that was courting. And I think that's where it comes from, because a harsh environment will actually develop a harsh culture, and I think we've developed a harsh culture from I do believe it's from the overseer's whip.
Okay.
And they had to teach each other to be harsh with each other, and had to teach their children to be harsh to survive the experience. So I think that's where it comes from. So I think we developed that kind of mating strategy from this from this experience, and we've never corrected it. So even today, our mating strategy is hard. The way we talk to each other is harsh. Like, say even in Their Eyes Are Watching God, right back in the 30s, right, and I'm sure she was writing about her experiences back in the teens and the 20s. Okay, when they met, a woman would always, pretend like she doesn't like you, right? Or she would turn her head. And I remember my experiences in the dating scene, which is why I don't like clubs, right? The initial reaction of walking in a black club, the women would all turn their heads and pretend to ignore you.
Oh yeah. Or one of the things we started to see in the 80s too, when you saw groups of women together, it began a sport.
Yes.
Disrespect black men as a group.
Yes.
And that was a whole thing in and of itself, right? To embarrass them publicly, to disrespect them. There's almost, a weathering kind of test that took place.
Yes.
Really not something I saw with other groups in the same way.
Yeah. And if you can remember, as because I had a young man that was in one of my panels, right? And he was saying that he was in high school, and there was a white girl that liked black guys, okay, and he raised his hand to ask a question, and she was snarky with him, And to the point where she was always mean, almost mean. And he said he couldn't understand it. And I said, yeah, she probably learned that mating strategy from a black girl. And sure enough, she had all her friends were black girls. And I said, she probably liked you. And he said, sure enough, she tried to get a ride. She tried to snuggle up to him in the library. But the thing is that that comes from being a little kid. You know, I remember when I was 8 years old. The first little girl that liked me, she punched me in the arm. Okay, and called me a few names.
Right. And it's cute at 8. It ain't cute at 38.
At 38, but the thing is, it never changes. That is the way you learn to relate to each other. Right.
But there, you know, one of the things that sparked me on this week that had me really meditating on it is I woke up one morning, I think this was probably about Monday, and I was like, okay, you know, let me step back, because, you know, I have people who comment on my work and my, you know, things I'm putting out there, and they're saying you're being too hard, you're being too mean, you know, you hate women, all these kinds of things. So I said, okay, let me just chill. And I called an elder family member, and I said to myself, you know, okay, let me just connect, you know, and hear and see what's out there. Maybe I'm tripping. So I get in a conversation with this elder, you know, family member, and, you know, we chit chat for a little while, and then she starts to, you know, tell me about communicating with a younger female family member, and they were talking about having children. And, you know, they're going back and forth, and she kind of forgot who she was talking to for a minute. Got real comfortable, and she forgot. She was talking to me like I was one of her girlfriends or something. And then she, you know, when they got to this whole issue of whether or not to have a child with a man that you're not going to marry, popped out and said, but, you know, you got to be careful, because you don't want these niggas in here help, you know, trying to decide what to do with the child. You want complete control. And then she froze, and she was like, oh.
Yep.
She forgot who she was talking to.
Yeah, the mask slipped.
And I was just like, wow, if there was any confirmation that what I'm doing is important, is necessary. This random phone call where I'm contemplating, okay, am I going too hard in the paint? Did I miss something? It was just a casual phone call. There was nothing behind it. I didn't set it up. I wasn't trying to, and I just said, now, and I thought about it. I said, okay, this is a baby boomer who is passing on this information to Gen X's. And Gen X is passing that information on, and so, you know, so on and so forth. And this is principally through girls. I mean, the majority of my maternal side of the family is female. So this was an elder member of my maternal side of the family. And I'm saying, this is how y'all talk to each other. And I told her that. I said, now see, you had problems with my work, but listen to what came out your mouth. And there wasn't an acknowledgement. There was, well, I was talking about men that, you know, kill their wives. Word.
Yeah. Is this what we're doing?
That's what we're doing now. We really less than 1% of black men. It's not even 1%. You want to deal with the fraction of 1% of black men that do that as a justification for what you just said, that had nothing to do. Nothing. We weren't talking about abuse. We weren't talking about intimate partner homicide. Had nothing to do with it. You want to make sure these niggas don't have any input on raising.
Yeah, you want complete control, complete autonomy.
Control.
Yeah, unless he's paying.
And it's like, I'm not crazy. I was just sitting there. I was like, if this ain't an example of the universe telling me. Appreciate that, Kemet. If this ain't an example of the universe telling you to keep going, I don't know what is. But that was so out of the blue, and I'm not used to seeing the mask slip a whole lot. But it was interesting to see, because it was like, okay, this low boiling contempt we talk about, this is coming. You know what I mean? From a married elder. You know what I mean? And I'm saying, if this is a level of contempt that's coming from married elders, what are single younger women extending? And I know I directly experienced it, so it's a rhetorical question. But it led me back to that. Appreciate that, J-Dub. It led me to the statement you were making about, you know, meanness as a dating strategy, but also another component that you said that I was really drawn to. You said they hate needing us.
They do.
Right? They hate needing us. And that was principally what the discussion was about. She was saying that in order to reproduce, you obviously need seed from a man. But how can you get the seed without allowing him to have input?
Right.
You know what I mean? That's one of the things that I noticed. And from that moment when you said it, it brought it out, and I could see it like plain right in front of me. See it for what it is without the kind of disruption that I bring to it, because I don't want to accept that. I'm fighting against it. I'm trying to create this image in my head of women that want us because we are their men, and having to come to the reality that there's a thing here that people are saying isn't there. People are trying to tell us doesn't exist. Appreciate that, Micah. But it's real.
Yeah.
And we get to this contempt about actually having to need us. And I've actually had exes say that aloud. I hate that I can't just, be rid of you. Or I hate that, actually one woman actually told me, I hate that I can't stop loving you. And it sounds like a compliment in a love song, but she wasn't saying it in a complimentary manner. She was saying it like she really resented that she felt the vulnerability that comes with loving someone. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
This hate to need us. Can you expound on that?
In any society, right? There's, and Jim Sedanius talks about the social dominance theory, right? In any society, the females will gravitate to the higher social status, as higher social status as they can. And unfortunately, black men, as Claude Anderson has said, are the designated underclass. In other words, I think in my video I said we're the floor. We are the floor, and said, okay, I said the floor supports you and it holds you up, but also what do you do to a floor? You walk on it.
Wow.
And you don't respect your floor. You don't respect your floor till you fall through it. Okay, you never think about your floor, you never respect your floor, you do all kinds of stuff to your floor until it breaks and you fall through it. Then you worry about your floor. And I think that is the case where black women see us. Okay.
Well, by the way, that was a cussing moment for me. I mean, the moment I heard that, I was like, at BGS, I was cussing. I was like, damn, because it was dead on, and I hadn't heard it put that way before. You're the floor.
Yes, we're the default. Because you got to remember, man. If because God knows I've read in the last couple of months, man. I've had to read at least 6 books on things to do with slavery and the economics of slavery, and after emancipation. Okay, you got to remember we're not an organic group. Okay, African American, or the Negro, which is a proper name. So that's why I use Negro, because that's the proper name of the class that was actually created. Okay, 91% of Negroes were actually born and bred in this country on purpose to be in slavery. We weren't captured in slavery; we were actually bred into slavery. Okay, we're bred to be work units. And after emancipation, they had nothing else to do with you. Okay, so basically, they assigned you women. We were actually assigned, just like, we weren't organically put together. We're actually assigned to each other. And it's never been organically meshed. You can see that we made do with what we had, and we came together to work through the environment, through Jim Crow. But the thing is, as soon as Marty had noticed, as soon as Jim Crow ended, black women tried to separate. That's where it comes in with the Moynihan scissors, where welfare went up, even as black male unemployment went down. Okay, every other group, okay, the women come off of welfare when their man gets a job because they want to keep the family together. Black women chose another path. And that's why Moynihan had to stop and write the report, because he said something's different about this group of people, this group of Americans. We need to find out what it is. And all this stuff about this low level disrespect, this low level contempt, this low level, whatever about for their own men was always there. It's been there with, if you read Frazier's book, the Negro Family in the United States, which is what Moynihan named his paper after. It was there, even before slavery, even before slavery ended.
Well, quickly, real
Go
quick.
ahead.
Shout out to Michael Green and Kashif for the Cash Apps. Appreciate that. Shout out to Darius. Appreciate that support. But you can even see it listening to Sojourner Truth when she talks about this whole question of black men getting the vote and this comparison of black men to white men in terms of black men being oppressive even more so if if they get the vote. So this kind of misandry that we're talking about is not new. It's not new. It goes back quite a while, but it's buoyed, it's lifted, it's exacerbated, if you will, by political advancements that occur over time. What you're talking about is the shift with welfare, and instead of it bringing families together, especially when we saw an increase in employment, it was viewed the opposite way. It was viewed as an opportunity to not have to need black men. Now, if this is happening in the 40s and the 50s, how does that then get translated to the next generation and to the next generation? You know what I mean? And when we act like these things aren't, I find outside of YouTube, even in the academy, I rarely find discussions about how these things impacted worldview and attitudes by race and gender, particularly in the black community. We don't have those conversations enough, in my assessment.
Yeah, so when you do your work, which is advocating for your boys who are obviously suffering, because God knows you've gone through thousands of stats and situations and books and articles about how black boys are suffering under this oppressive situation, or this oppressive society, and black women, especially at the top, blow it off like it's not necessary. Basically, they, just like in the book, they said, okay, black men have to go out and take their chances. Black boys have to take their chances. In other words, we know they need help, but guess what? We don't think they need help, or we don't think they're deserving of help. I think that's probably a greater thing. We don't think they're deserving of help.
Yeah. I mean, to the point where we know the reading levels are so ridiculously low, and yet, to me, the reading levels are frustrating enough. Reading, math, and science, and this is something that I've talked about on the show, where we talk about black boys by the 8th grade, only 10% are proficient in reading, 12% in math and science. And yet, what frustrated me more than that was the lack of outcry. The lack of outcry is what blew me away more than anything. And not hearing it. And then when I thought about it, and I'm saying, okay, well, we got our girls who are the most enrolled in higher education across race and gender. How then do the two things relate? For K, especially through high school, I was going to say K through 12, but through high school, you're talking about one demographic in the same community that's the highest enrolled, the other demographic far behind in terms of reading, math, and science, and no outcry whatsoever in any significant way. How does that make sense?
Especially over the last, people said it since the 70s or the 60s. No, this has been since the 1890s. It was designated, that black males didn't need education past the 6th grade, and girls, black girls needed as much education as they could. Like even in the book, The Eyes Watching God, Granny wanted her daughter to school out.
Yeah.
In other words, get as much education she could so she can get the best chance and pick the best mates that she could find. Yeah. Okay. You never saw that for black men. In fact, I think Black Guru said most black men left school in the 7th or 8th grade to actually start working with the family to actually send the girls to school.
Yeah. And that was a time period in the middle part of the 20th century where when you talk to a man of say my grandfather's age, he can tell you more often than not, I dropped out in the 3rd grade, the 6th grade, the 9th grade. And because that was a labor strategy for black men.
Yes, it was.
Which was viable when you could actually, you could work with your hands in a manner where you could feed your family. So it wasn't as much of a disruption until you had this deindustrialization that hit. And all of a sudden the jobs were gone.
Yes.
And there was no structural redefining of the direction of black men. There was no heavy emphasis or investment in black men. And before you say, there's no such thing as investing in one demographic in the black community, that's what we're seeing right now. We've been seeing it for the last year. I've been one of the ones who've been outspoken during the pandemic about a lot of these new grants that were popping up to support small entrepreneurship in the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
None of them were earmarked for Black men. Not one. I've yet to find someone that could show me one. And even if you did, it would be one. But during that whole period last year where there was so much emphasis on helping mom and pop businesses, nothing earmarked for Black men. Appreciate that, Mars. And then after that, when we started to see a serious investment post the death of George Floyd, right, we started to see this investment in Black girls via corporations like Goldman Sachs, putting forth billions and nothing for Black boys. And the idea that I heard people saying under the table was, well, we're rationalizing this because it's women that are, in the streets, they're advocating for Black men, they're protesting, and Black men are doing nothing. That's the kind of subtext that we get. Black men are doing nothing. What do you think about that?
As you say, you are actually using, Black men are doing nothing except dying, right? They're not doing anything, but the thing is that you're using their deaths to promote yourself. So who's paying the ultimate price? The women are protesting in the streets with officers maybe putting a zip tie around their hands and letting them go later on within a few hours of the men are actually dying in the street to police violence. Or even if protesting, they have to actually withstand violence from police. They're actually targeted. So the thing is that at the end of the day, you're using. We're supposed to be a community, okay, and we're supposed to help out the most vulnerable people that in our society, in our community. And are we a community or not? Because the rights and the privileges that they have, isn't because Black men were in the streets. It's because Black men burned down 100 cities in 1968. And the Kerner Commission actually gave you all this equal opportunity. It wasn't there before.
So now there's a couple areas we can talk about this in a way that doesn't generally get invoked in this context. When we talk about activism, what you're suggesting is that the uprisings that took place that were in many ways male-led had an impact on the political advancement of Black folk. Which is interesting because we don't talk about activism in that way. Activism now is solely in the streets holding signs or doing so over social media. It's protest along those lines, but we don't talk about the ways in which something like an uprising actually moved the needle right, in terms of political advancement. But then the other side of it too is the military service. What Black men have been doing in the military since the Civil War. How did that? Appreciate that, Adam. How did that, in your assessment, impact how we were able to advance, at least in regard to having certain rights acknowledged, having certain issues on the table?
If you think about it, okay, if you go back in history, okay, civil rights basically first started with the Pullman Porter strike. In the 30s.
Yes, sir.
Okay, with men actually risking their lives against one of the most powerful corporations in the nation at the time, the Pullman Porters, the trains. Okay, the railroads. Okay, okay, they were beaten, they were killed, they were disappeared.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and basically the reason that you finally got what we call civil rights or integration, okay, is because you had two experiences. One after World War I, which is the Red Summer, where they were lynching and hanging ex-soldiers coming back from World War I, and then again in 1945 after World War II, when the Black soldiers came back and were being lynched again, and they demanded Truman and Eisenhower to do something. They said, we served this country, we fought for the country, we died for this country for hundreds of years, and this is how we were paid. We can't even come back and get the benefits that everybody else is getting. We have proved ourselves equal. And finally, Truman and Eisenhower said, you know what, we're going to relent. We're going to start this process. And that's where the process started. It wasn't about protesting or basically doing a line dance in front of a BLM sign or whatever. That's where it started.
Are you talking about twerking, sir?
I am talking about twerking, sir.
How dare you? Wow. That is a viable form of activism, brother. I'm just saying, twerking.
Well, in other words, basically, and I've said this, this country and what black people have in this place in this country is not built on black female activism. It's built on the bodies of black men. You know, even in Jim Crow with the work camps and all the people, all the people that died in those work camps under Jim Crow, whose bodies have still yet to be dug up. I mean, in Texas, they dug up like what 4,000 or 5,000 bodies from prison work camps that have been there for 30 years.
Yeah, and one of the things we saw, especially during Reconstruction, is that within a matter of years, the rate of death for many of these brothers that were forced into labor, and I don't say brothers arbitrarily. Appreciate that, no one. It was black men in many ways targeted for this kind of forced labor for the South to reclaim what was once free labor. They basically did it by manipulating the 13th Amendment. But one of the things they did when they put brothers to work, you had 35 and 45% increases in deaths across the board doing this labor. Many of these men were stocked into prisons where they were literally forced to lay on top of each other, no air conditioning, no air. You had men suffocating in overcrowded prisons, but forced to work literally until death.
And we're not talking about just, when we say men, we're talking about males 8 years and up.
Yes, sir. Boys and men, no question.
Boys and men. So when we say men, we're not talking about men over 18. We're talking about boys, starting at the age of 8, 9, and 10, all the way up.
But why is this, in your assessment? Usually I have BGS, here, where we go through it together. But I am formally interviewing him today because this video was fire, and I want to support it. But why, in your assessment, do you think it's such a problem for us to say boys and men in regard to African American history and identify just that group? What do you think?
Because of what you say, it's flat blackness, and it's to make a claim to be human, to make a claim of suffering. Okay, you got to have suffering. Okay, and if we look at it, did black females suffer? Yes, they did. But did they suffer to the extent that black males suffered? No, not even close. Even today, when we talk about flat blackness, as far as police violence and in prison, homelessness, everything.
Per year, 200 to 300 black men per year killed by police officers.
Yeah, you look at the prison: 30,000 to 60,000 black women versus 600,000 or 700,000 black men.
Not counting the ones at home with ankle bracelets. And in terms of the homeless, folks know, if you watch my last video where I raised the question of why black men seem to have a problem with helping each other, we'll erect housing for the homeless and prioritize women and girls, which on one level is fine. But when you look at the rates of homelessness across race, 70% of the homeless are male. And when you look in the black community, so, when you start talking about, ex-cons who can't get housing even when they have vouchers, what are we talking about when you look at the homeless? But to identify black men as a group that needs support and to provide that support even as other black men, or somehow there's a shaming, that sign language comes into play there. That's not viewed as it's not viewed as a positive or as something to aspire to do.
Yeah, I mean, when we make a claim, when black men make a claim, both men and women call it whining.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the biggest things that I hear as well. Not only are you guys just like feminists or who hurt you or, any of those kind of things, you also hear that this is whining. But as Black Uru Strikes is saying in the comments, we can look at a number of different indices. We can look at unemployment, education, life expectancy. We can go across the board. And statistically speaking, black males are more vulnerable. Hell, we can look at the top 10 causes of death starting from in the womb, age 85. Black men are across the board, except for maybe 2 age groups over the age of 50, the most vulnerable group in terms of death. It's absolutely ridiculous. And they've even superseded black women in terms of heart disease. It's absolutely ridiculous. But to point out black men as a vulnerable group is a heresy of some type.
Even for ourselves.
Even for ourselves.
Claiming victim status is a heresy, even amongst ourselves.
Right. Right. And so I go back to something you pulled out in the video as well. Mind you, this video is only 16 minutes. I literally could have played the whole thing for you, but I actually want you to support the video. So after you finish the show, I put the link in the comments. I hope you'll actually go listen to the video because it's powerful. But there's one thing you said at a certain point. You said she doesn't want you, and her price doubles, or at least you said your price. You said your price doubles for her, and she still doesn't respect you. What did you?
I mean, if you take even somebody like you that checks boxes, right? Okay. That does, you know, I think I don't know if you mentioned this or not in a video about your own personal experience where you made double what a young lady made that you were dating.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you mentioned this publicly or not.
Yeah, it was my first attempt at a relationship after my wife passed. And you know, I was still new to teaching. I hadn't got tenure yet, but I was tenure track. And I was, you know, I was making like 60. I was doing my thing, and she made 30. And I remember she told me, "Well, you don't make enough for me." And I was like, "Word, huh? Interesting." So 100% increase is still not okay.
On top of being accomplished, on top of being a PhD, on top of being educated, on top of being 6'2". You know, I'm serious. On top of being 6'2". In other words, you just see these boxes being checked, and it's still not enough. Yeah, you make 60 and I make 30, but you had to make 90 or 100. The thing is, and you see them accept average Brad.
Well, yeah, we don't even, yeah. That's
average Brad. Or you see. I've been down in places like Guatemala and like Nicaragua, like Mexico, right, where they're peasants living in a shack, and as poor as they are,
yes, sir,
with nothing, that woman shows him the utmost femininity, the utmost respect, the utmost submission. Okay. For that man, just because he's making an effort to be with her and support the family, not what he has, but what he's trying to do. Okay.
And I'm going to put this. I just went to the Wall Street Journal site, and I'm letting people know if you make $60,000 a year, you are in the top 21% of earners in America. Meaning 79% of America makes less than you. If you put that in the Black community, if you make 60 and you're Black across gender, you're in the top 13% of Black folk. 87% of Black America makes less than you if you make 60 a year. If you are a male, if you are a Black male making 60 a year, right, you are in the top 15% of Black men. So, so what I get to is, you know, something we've been discovering listening to interviews with Kevin Samuels, which basically, you know, is just kind of outlining the same experiences many of us had, but putting it out in public. I can tell this story 100 times, but it's not going to impact you to the degree of hearing a woman call in and say it out loud. You know what I mean? But it's basically the same thing. It doesn't matter. Even if you're in the top 13% of America's, it's still not enough.
It's not enough.
And it wasn't so much for me. It wasn't that it emotionally hurt me that she said it. If anything, I laughed. And I'm not the one to fight you to stay. I'm like, baby, if you need to go. You know, do your thing. I know statistics, but what got me was the contract that I talked about earlier in the 1980s. And that was when I realized the contract it didn't really exist. You know, we were lied to in many ways as far as that. And so it brought me to it started me on this road to this space where I wanted to get around other Black men and compare notes. And more of us found that the contract didn't exist. It wasn't real. So when you talk about her price doubling, explain that.
In other words, you know, if you listen to the literature, right, that Black men don't have jobs, they can't take care of a family, they're not employed, or this constant thing that Black men are falling behind Black women at all levels. Okay. You hear that, right? We're the most educated. We have the most businesses. We're making the most money. And then we looked at the BLS report for 2020 just a few weeks ago, right? And what we noticed, and what you pointed out, because I saw it, but you pointed out, you noticed it at every income level. I mean, every income level starting at $15,000 a year, right?
Age 18 to 65.
From 18 to age 65, black men are at least $1,000 to $2,000 ahead of every black woman at every level. At every level.
For employed black men, yes.
Employed black men at every level.
You actually make more. Yeah.
We actually make more. And the thing is that never gets pointed out. In fact, we get ridiculed as the opposite. And what they really mean is we're not making enough for what they want.
Yes. And that's where you get to the crux of it. It's not a matter of whether or not you're achieving or doing well. It's, are you doing well in relation to what I'm imagining I want? And this is where we get to the top 5% of men used as a model to measure all men against. And 5% is purely by materialistic means. I mean, we can have a conversation about maturity, spiritual maturity. We have a conversation about life experience. Are you in a position to guide someone? Are you in a position to lead a family? Do you have the bearing to handle the issues that a family has to face? I mean, there's so many different metrics we can use to measure men. But the metric imposed on men, especially black men, is material.
It's material.
And so when we start to respond with the data on the material, right, then all of a sudden, black men are then turned around and accused of being overly materialistic. Right? One of the things that we're recently starting to hear, this brewing, impending battle that people are starting to see with, say, Kevin Samuels and Dr. Umar Johnson, right? This tension going back and forth. And the idea that somehow brothers are just, functioning on a materialist level and they're buying into this European idea. But what we're saying is the material is being imposed on black men, and the very women that you're trying to couple and build families with are using it as the primary barometer for value.
But you notice that it's not a problem to measure black men and use the barometer. The only problem comes in is when you ask for something in return. That's when it becomes an issue. It's not that there's not high value men and that you shouldn't want them or need them. The thing is, what do they get in return? And that's where the issue's starting to, that's where the angst is.
Because to say, if we go down the checklist, we go down the boxes we talked about earlier, over 6 feet, over 6 figures, at least 6-inch package, the ability to navigate the street and the boardroom, to have the 6-pack and to be muscular and strong, be able to fight, be able to, you can go down the list. All of that is material. All of it is material, but it's not described as materialistic. It's described as necessary for her well-being, for the family's well-being, for security. But when black men say, okay, well, if those are the things you require, then these are the things I need. Well, all of a sudden that's materialism. Wait a minute. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And the people that are calling out materialism, even the brothers, I'm like, look, I challenge you. Let's take a look at the girlfriends you've had. How many of them did you get with because she had a nice personality? Let me deal with that. The very people that are talking about Western values are using the same standards in their own lives. Look, if you're going to come to me and tell me that these discussions have no merit and we're just going to operate on, okay. Well, what I find interesting is when you've not married and you're talking about, the necessity of building community and nation and all of these things, and you're not marrying, I'm like, what do you, especially if you're over 40 and you're accomplished, what are we actually talking about here? If that is part of your belief system, then it needs to happen. But the reason you're not marrying are the same issues that you and I are talking about right now. Right. Issues you raised in your video.
Yes.
And this speaks to how pervasive these issues are. It's not an accident that I'm in contact with literally hundreds of black men per week who are telling me the same stories. I have black men that disagree with my position, but tell the same stories.
Tell the same story.
I've had nationalist brothers that say, I can't stand what you're talking about. And I'll be like, I understand. You married? Yes. Where's your wife from? well, she's from South Africa. She's from Kenya. She's from where? Like, oh, really? Okay. So you're an African American brother, who's accomplished, and you married someone from another country. Yeah, okay. Well, be real. What happened in your upbringing and your experience before you got married with your women here in America? Oh, well, and then they'll start laughing. And I'm telling you this, I am on the phone or over email or over Messenger with brothers that I've never met, who have advanced degrees, who are accomplished, who don't like my position, who disagree. And then when we get into a critical dialogue about their life experience with their own women, they're telling me the same stories. And I'm like, well, what exactly does it take before we can actually begin to have a realistic conversation?
Yeah, the thing is, they can't destroy the floor. What happens? What happens if you destroy the floor? What happens when the seams in the floor start to come apart? Yeah. Which is what I was begging for. At least tell the truth, so everybody has their cards on the table, and you will go into it knowing what you're dealing with your eyes wide open, knowing how she feels about you. As a group. I'm not saying all women. I'm going to say that because I know I'm going to get that. Not all, right? I'm not saying all women. The thing is, it's far too pervasive. Been going way too long, and it's systemic. That's the thing. It's systemic.
Right.
When I can read literature back in the 30s that say it has the exact same pattern as what's going on in the 2020s, come on.
But I think that's, to me, the core of what I'm trying to get at. It isn't about I'm angry about a woman and I'm going to attack everybody, or I'm going to get with brothers that are angry about some relationship they had. When you actually begin to look at the history, when you actually begin to look at the policies that created this. I mean, when you talk about something like, and I'm just going to pull one, you talk about no-fault divorce. Does that have an impact on coupling? If all of a sudden you can not only get divorced, at whim, but more often than not get custody and get a strong stake in his income, does that have a bearing on relationships post 1970s?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's the last, it is, even for patriarchal marriage, right? Or any marriage. Okay. There was always a contract as far as marriage is concerned when you actually put people together, organize people in units, right? Which is a family unit for raising children. Okay. The burden was for the man was to provide and take care of the woman and her children. And his reward for doing such was the property and stuff was his, and the children that he worked for, that he paid for, were his. And her reward is she would always be taken care of. And if he got rid of her of no fault of her own, he had to compensate her. Okay. But the thing is that if you allow women to choose to eject somebody from marriage and they get the children and rewards, guess what's going to happen? One, women are going to take advantages, and two, marriage is going to go down because it's a bad deal, because there's no incentive for a man to get married, because at the end of the day, everything he worked for 20 years, including his children, can be taken from him. And even in matriarchies in Africa, if the wife gets dissatisfied after 10, 15 years, okay, you can go, you can leave. If you get dissatisfied, guess what you leave with? You leave with nothing. Okay. If it's that bad and I'm that bad to you, I'm that cruel to you, and you want to leave, you leave with nothing because it's that bad. Okay. That's a powerful incentive for a wife to stay.
Right. Not only is it incentive for a wife, when I look at now, right now, you can get into a relationship. I'm talking about BGS right now. You can get into a relationship right now. And if it does not go well, especially if you're falsely accused of abuse with no evidence, you can lose the house you're living in. You know what I mean? If you marry and get divorced, you can. And this I'm saying, for this to be so accessible for people, I mean, where so many men have gone through this same experience without any safeguards, no checks and balances of any significance. And you're going to tell me this doesn't have an impact not only on mating, marriage rates, so on and so forth, or hell, we can talk about birth rates,
Mm-hmm.
right? The impact of all of that. These things have impact on worldview and behavior. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the point that I'm trying to get across in regard to masculinism. It's not about hating women or being mad at women because somebody broke your heart or, what. That's not what it is. We're looking at this systemically, and we're looking at how the macro affects the micro. We're
Yes.
looking at how the policies affect the woman that's standing in front of you, or the wife you married, or the
Mm-hmm.
mother of your children, and the
Mm-hmm.
degree to which she can have conversations with family members
Yes.
or you get married in preparation for what she can do to you. It's not
Yes.
he's going to do it. It's not to say that, it is simply to say she's been prepared. This is something you mentioned in your video as well. You talked about women who have had family members prepare them for what you can do to him to exact control.
Yes.
Expound on that.
Yes. I was saying that I said that this is so embedded about this them not wanting you, or the disrespect or the contempt, or the lack of respect for their men, that a man can actually go to another culture, bring back a wife, bring back a woman, and not the world, not her girlfriends or coworkers, your female relatives will insist on schooling her on how to control you, put you in your proper place, not letting you think that you have some kind of independence or some kind of control over your own family.
Yeah. And there's another area to this that I've only heard you and I talk about, and I don't know if, I'm not saying no one else does, but I've only heard it from you and I. We talked about the experience of kind of being passed off like a horse.
Yes.
From a mother to a new wife.
Yes.
Explain that a little bit, if you
with the in a patriarchy. That's why I call this subculture that we have in the United States, in Negro culture, is a gynocracy. In patriarchy, right? Who gives away the daughter to the husband? Who passes the daughter to the husband, to a husband's family, who is control? It's the father, right?
Father, yeah.
The father makes sure that they school the wife on how to act, and basically in school the husband on what his duties are, as far as taking control of his wife and his family. Okay. In other words, the father gives away the bride to the husband, literally, right?
Right.
In a matriarchy, your mother gets with your girlfriend or your wife and schools her on how to control you. Basically, she's passing control of you to your wife or to your girlfriend. I saw my mother did that. I remember back in the day when the debit cards first came out. Really, I think the debit cards first came out in 1985, right? And so I'm a single man. Just in case if you're a black man, you can get locked up, arrested, and if you need bail, somebody has to go get money for you, right? So I had two, one for me and one for my mother, right, in case of emergencies, right? Okay. I got engaged to my fiance, right? And we moved in together. I saw my mother literally hand her my debit card and tell her, you have him now.
Oh, wow. That
you have him now, and now it's your turn to take care of him, right?
Appreciate that, man, Friday. I'm laughing because I went through the same thing. I remember when I got married, her family would call to check to see on how I was treating her. My family would, especially my mother would call her to see how I was treating her. Now I've never been married before. It's my first marriage. I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't have family members call to say, "Hey, man, how's the marriage going? How is the relationship going? Do you need any advice?" Especially elders. They called and asked her how I was treating her. Now there's two posts, two comments that I want to put up that kind of speak to this. Shout out to Uru. He over there killing it in the comments. But he says, my own grandmother told my wife not to let me get away with mistreating her. Now, this is what I'm referring to. He's not saying his grandmother said, hey, hey, baby, how's marriage going with you? How's your wife treating you? That's not what the conversation was. His grandmother, who who has known him since the day he came out of his mother, checking with the wife about him. Right? Same thing with the next one. This is from Bishop X. My auntie sat next to my white ex and said, "Let me teach you how to check this boy." Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about. Okay.
I just want to know.
That's what I'm talking about. Okay. They are giving control. They have control over you when you're coming up as a boy. Which is one of the other things that they don't do with their girls. They give the girls independence, and they want to control the boys, right? And they literally hand over control from one female household to the next. Literally.
Wait a minute. There's let me do this real quick. I'm gonna send this out. This brother is saying a few things, and I'm gonna see if he'll come up in here, but I don't know. It's not guaranteed. He may be busy.
Okay.
But Brother Ronald, I sent you the link to your Facebook. I don't know what your time is. I don't know what your time is. You may not be able to. It's understandable. But yeah. But
yeah, I saw the comment.
Man, you can't drop that and not explain that, man. You had to come up here and explain that. Not that I disagree. It needs to be stated. What's up, Roger Report? Thank you for that support. Good to see you in here, man. I just met the brother on Dr. Dunbar's stream last weekend. Y'all support the Roger Report. Y'all support the Roger Report. Y'all support Dr. Dunbar. What's the name of Dr. Dunbar's channel?
Dr. Dunbar's channel, he has several of them, but Big Discussion 76, if you put that in any one of the search engines, all 4 of his channels will come up.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Both. So the brother's definitely doing some work. But no, man, but this ownership thing speaks to something that we haven't been able to voice until the last few years. And I've been told something about this, but I heard of this concept of the gynarchy. And why is it first, for those who may not know what it is, can you explain it? But then also tell us, why is it that it took until a few years ago before we really started to? Now there have been indications. I mean, even Dr. Martin Luther King, I said this before, even Dr. Martin Luther King identified what he called the Black matriarchy. So we've had, we've had elements of this. Sociologist Robert Staples did so as well. But when we talk about a gynarchy, why did this have to be newly developed? How would you? So tell us what it is and why is it new?
Okay, the gynarchy is not a matriarchy, right? The matriarchy is, as it put, is basically it has is matrifocal, which is the women have control of the family. But the thing is that they have patriarchal control by their men. So in other words, government laws, control of society is actually done by men, even though it's a so-called matriarchy. Basically, a matriarchy is a word called equity, where there's a balance between male and female. A patriarchy is an imbalance between male and female, where men actually rule over everything. They literally own their women and children and families and everything else. Okay. A gynarchy is ruled by women. Okay, which is very difficult to actually achieve, because normally men are the builders. They're stronger. They can overpower you. The thing is that they can only exist in a greater patriarchy, which we have in the United States. Which is explained. You have white patriarchal control, but on the ground, by law, going back to 1750 in Virginia, where the control of the Black family was actually handed over to women. So this control of the Black, what we call the Black subculture, the Negro, is actually ruled by women, and the money, the power, the finance is all filtered through the Black woman. So the Black woman literally controls and rules the Black family and the Black society.
But it's backed by policy.
Backed by policy.
So what we're really saying is you're talking about white control by proxy.
By proxy.
Structured by policy. See,
structured by
we're
policy.
at this whole issue of whether or not Black masculinism is just, Black feminism is just the reverse. No, what we're talking about is something that is rooted in the history. It's rooted in the policy. It's rooted in the structures that a society depends on, from employment to education across the board.
If you think, If you think about it, look at all the programs. Look at Goldman Sachs and Google. Where do they filter the money through? Did they say we're going to, Moynihan wanted the money to be through, um, filtered through the black male. In other words, they wanted the black family fit in just like every other part of the patriarchal society, right? And black women refused. They refused to give up control.
Yeah.
In other words, they I always say, what is the greatest trick the devil ever pulled? To convince people that he didn't exist, right? What is the best trick that the Gynarchy ever pulled? To convince black men that the Gynarchy doesn't exist, even though we know that that it does, because you cannot criticize black women. You can't talk against them. You can't do anything against them, because everybody knows in the black community, and Shay Morse, you found that out. If you piss off black women, you can be economically punished.
Oh yeah,
immediately.
You found that out quick, boy.
He found it out quick. If you don't kiss the ring, the Gynarchy ring, you'll be punished immediately. We found out that the Gynarchy flexed its muscles in the 2020 elections by strong-arming black men to vote Democrat.
Right. And this push to get a certain vice president into office, and when black men tried to argue that it's not a question of whether black men were not opposed to a female vice president or a black female vice president. What we were saying was the one y'all are pushing is a problem. And all of a sudden, if you spoke, ill of voting, for her, in terms of trying to purposely get her into office, you were inherently appreciate that, Otis. You were inherently, misogynist, right? But recently we saw it came out, and I'll probably do a short video on this going into more depth, where she talked about how racism doesn't really exist. And it's an interesting thing, because you started to see black women frustrated with her about it, talking about being publicly embarrassed, right? And this is coming from some black women that were so, like Amanda Seals, that were pushing so hard for this. She was telling people, don't even look into the history, don't look into these candidates' backgrounds, vote because we need this black woman in office, and didn't even qualify for whether or not the black woman
even overlook her white Jewish husband,
or the degree to which her, mixed heritage would play out in terms of the degree to which she'll go to bat for black issues. You know what I mean? But none of that was on the table, because we just had to get a woman in there. And so now you have sisters coming out publicly and saying we're embarrassed that we picked her. And it's kind of like, when black men said it, it was a problem. Now, anyway, but there's something else you said in your video. You asked the question, and this is a question that I think many of the brothers deal with in this space, and are at least courageous enough to publicly talk about it. The question you posed was, why struggle with women who don't want you? Talk about how you came up with that, and what's around that.
The thing is that if you look at what we have to struggle to just to be with black women, and the outcomes of not just us but also our boys, men being homeless, boys being undereducated, and they're showing you they show you that their contempt and their lack of respect, and we're jumping over all these hurdles to be, as they say, alpha your way through it. You got to be better. You got to earn more. You got to take better control. You got to build all these businesses and basically, bootstrap your way up so that you can, jump over the, climb up the castle wall and be with her. And said, but you have other groups. You look around and see other women and other groups of men that don't have to go through any of that.
Right.
The women meet the men where they are.
Absolutely.
And the thing is that and we've done this for 150 years. At what point is it enough? How many bodies do we have to sacrifice, man? How much blood do we have to shed? How much suffering do black men have to go through before we say enough is enough? Now, I don't know. I would love to have a functional Black community that functions not just for women but for everybody.
Appreciate that, AB. What's going on now?
And at what point do Black men said, you know, I'm not getting enough return?
Yeah, for the investment.
And at what point do you return on investment? You know, we're not talking about just investment for this generation or future generations. What we've already done.
Yeah.
At what point is that enough? They build statues for people, for groups of men that done half of what we've done.
Yeah. We got 478 in the building. Again, like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel. I'm going to bring in one Dr. Ronald Neal.
Oh, there he is.
What's going on, man?
Hey, how you guys doing?
I am humbled.
How you doing?
Listen. I was just sitting back, man, enjoying the conversation, man. You know? I just want to sit back and listen to these geniuses wax eloquently on, Black masculinism in our situation. And once it got to a certain point, man, I'm like, I couldn't hold back, man. You know what I mean? And
dropping nuclear bombs.
He did.
I was like, wait a minute. if you would, man, tell us a little bit about what you were saying and why, because that was powerful.
Yeah. So I mean, it's clear that we have this mentality where Black women see themselves as managers. Overseers of Black men.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go so far as to say that they are colonial administrators. And I think that we have to use the language of imperialism and coloniality as we say in academia to think about this. And that we have been managed in this country through women in this type of fashion, and this is about policing. This is about control. This is about management. This is about keeping Black men in their places. And I mean, we have to recognize the extent to which Black women have internalized racism and our interactions with Black women from the time that we jump out their wombs until the time that we go to our graves are impacted by this internalized racism. And it's in our relationships, it's everywhere. And it's really, it's a mirror of the larger society. So when we think about how the larger society treats Black men, when we think about the larger white society and the hostility that white society has towards us, and the incessant demand to police our sexuality, to police our aspirations, what we want to be, our desires for greatness, whatever you want, however you want to articulate it, you have to see Black women as a reflection of that. And unfortunately, and I've said this before, I said this last time we were together, they have not developed the type of internal introspective mechanism that would force them to come to terms with that. The extent to which they have internalized white supremacy and how that is enacted in our relations with one another. So the superiority complex, the idea that she is fundamentally superior to Black men, it is a corollary. All right, it is a subsidiary of white supremacy. So you have to look at the idea of white people feeling, seeing themselves as being superior to Black people or Black peoples. And her sense of superiority is simply just an offshoot of that. That's all.
Wow.
and we don't have anything within the culture, and that's why you all mentioned Kevin. That's why Kevin is catching so much hell right now, because Kevin is fundamentally questioning their sense of superiority. Kevin is questioning their beliefs that they exist on a plane that is, higher than Black men, and that Black men are utterly beneath them.
Yes.
And what Kevin is doing is he is questioning all of the assumptions that come with Black female superiority. He is questioning their sense of being exceptional, because what happens is they see themselves as being exceptional in this country, in America, within the context of whiteness, but they're also exceptional when they contrast themselves in juxtaposition to us. And what Kevin is saying to them is that, no, you're not exceptional.
Right.
You're not exceptional. And here are the reasons why you are not exceptional. You are not superior. And these are the reasons why you are not superior. Okay. And this is an affront to their sense of their self and who they are, especially the professional, educated women, the women who have done, pretty well for themselves and what have you, who, women who just don't look in the mirror. So I think that, it's one thing, yes, it's one thing to talk about her as an overseer, and we can do that. But I think the language of imperialism, the language of the colonizer, I think that's functional. I think that's useful. Of course, she doesn't have the power of an imperial power. She doesn't have the power of a colonizing power, but she has the psychology of an imperialist.
Well, she has the psychology of an imperialist, but it's also backed by a proxy societal access to be able to enact certain things against Black men that Black men don't have the power to do. You know what I mean? Whether you're talking about arbitrarily accusing a man of assault or rape, or whether you're talking about the kind of thing that can take place in regard to a divorce, we can talk about it on multiple levels, but those specific abilities that are far more entrenched in terms of what women have access to, this is tied to the psychology you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's the means by which that power dynamic is expressed and what Black men actually feel, what they have to respond to. When you start talking about brothers who are going to prison over child support or losing jobs over a arbitrary false accusation. I just posted an article a few days ago about a young woman that used a man to kill another man she was upset about or upset with. And she did it by arbitrarily and falsely accusing the gentleman she wanted killed of rape. And she appreciate that, Rock One. And she went to court and basically admitted, I just made that up. Right? This is a power. And this goes back to the Victorian, this is something you and Gigi dealt with, incredibly well. You know what I mean? Where we get to this Victorian, femininity that to be protected, but it's been weaponized and used in a very particular way that speaks to this type of imperialist, approach that you're talking about, Dr. Neal. It's powerful.
Yeah, and we see it being enacted. I had someone recently send me some information on that the $10 billion
Goldman Sachs
thing with a list of people who are part of that, Black people. Interestingly, one of the people who was behind that is Condoleezza Rice. And there was some other figures as well, and so I mean, this is so when you have that kind of proximity to whiteness and white power and what have you, and you're able to function in that way, I mean, that just reinforces your sense, of being something that is even something, you're someone, you're beyond Black. There's a transcendental exceptionalism that's going on there with lots of these women, okay, that is in my estimation, I mean, it's megalomaniacal as far as I'm concerned. You know what I mean? And what, you know, people like Kevin, not just Kevin, what we're doing. What we're doing is we are deflating it. We are questioning. We're putting pins in it, and bringing it to the ground. You know, and I mean, you know, and you know, BGS was saying earlier. You know, I don't know. He doesn't know. You know, when, if and when this will ever disappear or dissipate or what have you. But regardless of, you know, what happens in the future, I think that, you know, we have to continue to critique it and deconstruct it. You know what I mean? Because it's dehumanizing. Yeah.
And I think this is at the core of something else. Appreciate that, Snuggle. This is at the core of something BGS brought up in his video as well. And he talked about this very basic issue of cooperation. This is toward the end of the video. You talked about the refusal for basic level cooperation, right? And I think when you kind of link that to what Dr. Neal is asserting, you know, why do you cooperate with those you're colonizing? You know, there's no reason to. You described it as the floor. Well, you used a couple. You used the floor, and then you also talked about the old car. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay. Okay. I said the floor. I said the support. You know, the floor is needed. You may not want it, but the floor is needed. That's your support. That's your basic level of support, your foundation. Okay. But the thing is that I always say, what do you do to a floor? You don't respect the floor because you walk on it. You don't respect the floor until you fall through it. Same thing with the car. Okay. You say, you know, especially with a woman, you're given a car at 17, 18 years old. And it's one of those Japanese cars that just run forever, right? As long as you keep it tuned up and lubed, it'll run forever, right? And that car is what you know, considered a bucket, right? But it gets you to work, gets you every place you want to go in town. It never fails you, right? But the thing is, you don't like the car. You don't like the way it looks. You don't like the way that it was not your first choice. It was just your default mode of transportation.
Right.
But the thing is, you can't afford better. You can't afford to go out and buy the car that you really want. So you're stuck with this car, even though the car is perfectly fine, perfectly dependable. You actually have to have it to go to work, to get yourself around town, to do whatever you need to do. But ultimately, you're dissatisfied with the car, not because it's not serviceable, it's that you don't like it. It's not your first choice. You don't like the way it looks. You don't like the way people look at you, or your coworkers look at you when you get in it. Okay, you're ashamed of it because it's, even though it's serviceable, it's not you.
Yeah.
Can I say this? To think about a different type of analogy. So here's the thing. Think about this. Why is it that white people have not completely disposed of black people? When you had an opportunity to do this after slavery, during Jim Crow, in the middle of the 20th century, and you had all this talk, even, I mean, you had up into the 70s, you know, all this stuff about we don't need the Negro. Why is it that white people continue? If white people hate us so much, right? And they despise us, why is it that they haven't just gone ahead and just enacted the final solution to get rid of us? You see what I'm saying? And they haven't done that because they need us in some kind of way.
They do.
They need us. That's why they've kept us around in a kind of marginal fashion. And I'll give you an international example. So if we look at Africa, and you look at colonization in Africa and what have you, you know, I mean, you would think that after independence and after, you know, Nigeria, you would think that after the Congo, after different parts of Africa, you know, are seemingly emancipated from their colonial powers, that they would be able to find their own way.
Yeah.
But Europe has not been able to stay out of Africa. And it still continues to hold on to Africa in a kind of paternalistic fashion. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Europe doesn't eat without Africa.
Yeah.
But I wanna bring this a little closer to home. Dr. Neal, you put forth a video 3 days ago called the Black Man Removal Program, and I put the link in the chat on YouTube for the listeners. But how do you first please describe what that is, and tell us, how do you think it relates to our conversation?
Absolutely. So, I was, man, the video happened while I was in the park, man, and I'm just observing and watching things, and and we all see things as we go about in our daily activities and what have you. But I'm at a park where there is a family event, and there are all sorts of families that are there. There are Black people there, there are Latinos there, there are white people. Most of the folks who are there are white. And I just began thinking about the nature of things, and looking at the composition of the folks who are there. And I'm seeing families. What stands out the most were families. Mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, aunts, uncles, whatever. Okay. And the white family, if we look at the white family as a team, the team is intact.
Okay.
You look at the Latino family, Latino family as a team, the Latino family is intact. You look at the Black families, they're fragmented.
Yeah. So
I see women out there with their children, and I see a few men. And what it occurs to me that this is America. This is a window. This is a microcosm of America and how things work in this country. And I began to just see that, okay, the reason why we are not configured in the same way as these white people, as these Latinos, and there were other groups where I mentioned in the video who were not represented, Jews, people of Middle Eastern background, Asians, and what have you. The reason why we are not configured like that is because of policy, because of culture, because of politics. The black male has been removed from the family deliberately. Okay. And this Black female has been propped up by society as the functionary, as the leader, as the head, and what have you. And she enjoys her position. The woman who leads the household, she does not want to share any semblance of authority with a man in the household. I mean, the majority of Black female households, okay? She loves the fact that she runs it. And white society has created a situation where her status can flourish and continue. And so, yeah, when I was in that moment right there, all I saw history, man. I saw history. I saw social engineering. I saw welfare policies. I saw family policies. I saw employment policies. I saw, targeted employment. I saw all sorts of things. Yeah. One thing that I did not mention in that video, I didn't have time to do it. A Black man, a young Black man who was under the age of 30. I'm sitting at the park bench, and a young Black man under the age of 30 came and sat right next to me. And I get to talking to him, and come to find out, he came to the park to see his kids. He came to the park because the mother of his children told him to meet her there to see his kid. Okay, and I started digging into the story, and he just began to unravel, I mean, all of this antagonism and all of this tension between he and the mother of the child. Okay, and and I mean, I'm not going to go into elaborate detail about the whole story, but that played into a lot of my whole adventure in that scenario. So the Black male removal program is very real. It is very real, and so we are not making stuff up when we talk about the things that we talk about, and the policies. When we talk about what is going on right now, you know, in the aftermath of 2020 and George Floyd, I mean, everything now is like F black men. I mean, just F black men.
Yeah.
Everything has been diverted away from it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm looking at so much. I'm looking at all the outrage of some of the like Samaria Rice, the mother of Tamir Rice, and other women,
right,
who are just, they're fuming at BLM. They're fuming at BLM at the extent to which that they've, you know, exploited the deaths of their sons.
Yeah.
Okay. And everything has been diverted to other agendas. You know, that's a part of the design. That is social engineering right there.
Yeah.
That's the removal program.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I'm going to close this out very soon, but what I'd like to do is to have my two esteemed guests conclude their remarks in response to something BGS posed in his video. I'm just going to read the line, and I'm going to start with Dr. Neal, and then I'm going to let BGS, you know, give his reflections on the line. The statement was, "They need you, but don't want you." Dr. Neal, what are your thoughts?
That's again, that is her internal paradox. Hell, that's the paradox of the United States, man. I mean, it's reflective of our relationship with this country. It's much bigger than her. It enacts itself through her, but it's much bigger than her. You know, the way she looks at us is the way in which this country looks at us.
Say that again.
I'll say it again. The way that she looks at us is the way that this country looks at us. This country really doesn't want to. I mean, part of it might want to get rid of black men, but they really don't want to get rid of black men. Because there is so much about black masculinity in this country, all right, that has made America what it is.
Right. Okay.
In the eyes of the world.
Right.
That the black male image, and this is our leverage, the black male image has impacted the way people outside of the U.S. look at America. Okay. In terms of popular culture, in terms of our own political activity, at so many levels. So we're hated. It's almost like a love-hate, and I hate that I'm going to use the language. It's a love-hate relationship, man. That's it. And so I think that's what BGS, when BGS said what we said, it's this deep love-hate relationship. And black men need to decide whether they want to, and you have a choice.
Yeah.
You can entertain this love-hate relationship.
Yes, sir.
Or you can reject it altogether.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, choice is the architect said in Neal. It said in the Matrix, choice is a problem right now. You know, and as Dr. Curry has, you know, put in his work. Okay, and I'm sure Dr. Neal has said this also. Black men have been put in this box for so long, for 300-400 years. Black men have been in a box that they couldn't get out of, and all of a sudden, what happens when the box is no longer there? And black men have choice. You know, like it used to be the color line. Now it's no line. Okay, what will black men do now that they have choice? And that's the angst that we have with our women nowadays. That's how come the black manosphere is so hated. It's not that we really deride women. The thing is that we're actually expressing our choice. You know, our dissatisfaction with what we're getting. And what they're afraid of is that what happens when like I said, what happens when the seams of the floor come apart and there's no floor?
Yeah.
What catches the black community that's been supporting the bodies of black men that have been supporting this black community for 200-400 years? Okay, that actually the literal bodies of black men dying, you know, that support this community. What happens when that's no longer there? When black men no longer are willing to make the sacrifice, which is really, if you listen to pro-black and conscious community literature, they're asking black men to alpha. Okay, alpha your way through it. Put up with it. Bear with it. Don't leave. Okay. It's not about the women. It's about you making the choice to stay. What happens when black men don't want to make that choice anymore?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I would say that is the that's the fear that they have, right? That's why the Black manosphere, in many respects, threatens them. Okay, I mean, because this is digital. This is forever.
Yeah.
And there's no telling what type of implications that this is going to have 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road. And they have no other alternatives. Okay. I mean, because the other groups, the other men, the Asians, Latinos, hell, the white men, I don't care how much corporate America is trying to pair Black women with white women. Black women with white men together. Some things you can't force, bro.
They can't. The white men have never been. There's never been a barrier between white men choosing Black women.
Absolutely.
Ever.
Well, and the other thing I want to keep on the table when we talk about choice, you'll have people that'll come in and say, well, you guys are just talking about, other groups of women or white women or whatever. The choices that you see Black men engaging with, hell, even the brothers on this panel, you got variations of SYSBM, you got monkhood. That's the extent to which Black men are frustrated. You got brothers who are intelligent, accomplished, have something to bring to the table, and opt to be alone rather than deal with the contempt we're talking about. And that's dismissed when people say, oh, you guys just want you just want white women, or you just want I'm like, no, I'm talking about intelligent, accomplished brothers who would rather be alone. If that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what will. You know what I mean? There was a time I said this a few months ago. It was Traveris. Appreciate that. I was saying this to a couple of brothers I got with. We were having a discussion, and it was about 6 or 7 of us, and everybody in there at least had a college degree, but they were all accomplished. They were homeowners, all of that, and they were all ages from 30 to really between 30 to 65, right? And the thing about it was, not one of us were married. And I said, this is interesting. If you rewound this conversation 60, 70 years ago, it would be the exact opposite. You know what I mean? There's no way you'd have this 6 or 7 accomplished brothers on here where none of us were married. It made no sense. But it speaks to the shift that we're seeing in the culture. And yet you have people that'll just dismiss it as Black men just want white women, or, Black men. I'm like, no, you got brothers that would rather be alone. That's deep to me. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. Y'all tell me. But
no, I mean it's not just you. It's real, and at least from, I guess, my unscientific, sociological observations of the manosphere and technology. I mean, a good number of the brothers that we have in our spaces we have professional men. We have guys who are learned, who read or what have you. I mean, we have the tech heads. We have the guys who are doing very well for themselves. So, I mean, this is not, a place where, the tropes of Black women can really be entertained. You know what I'm saying? And so it's kind of like going back to Kevin Samuels, when Kevin Samuels is constantly, trying to, or not just trying to, but asserting the fact that, there are Black men who are functional. There are Black men who are stable and accomplished, and who are doing well, and that all your ideas over the last 50 years, that suggest that a Black man of Kevin Samuels' stature is a unicorn. It's just bogus. And I'm with you. I mean, I think this is. I mean, this is a very unique moment. This is a unique moment that we are in right now, and I don't think that we're not going to be the same after this. The people who come behind us, I mean, they're not going to be the same, man. This is, I mean, Black culture, Black America, I mean, the shift that is going on right now is so radical that it's difficult to really, fathom what's happening in the now. I mean, historians are going to have to look back at this and make sense of it all.
Well, and to answer your question about is Black masculinism just black masculine feminism in reverse. No, feminism is how to change society in their image, right? I think black masculism is about black men changing themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Knowing themselves and changing themselves, because it's really not about anybody else, society, women, anything else. It's about men knowing who they are and what they face.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Appreciate that support, K-Ron. Appreciate that. The lead attorney. Good to see you in here, man. Appreciate that, Rob Black. Thank you for the support, y'all. I want to thank my panel in here for coming through. Y'all make sure you support Black Gnostic. Is it Black Gnostic IBMOR? What's the other channel? BGF?
Oh, it's Black Pill Gnostic.
Black Pill Gnostic. And definitely support Dr. Ronald Neal. Go check out his channel. I put the links to both of their most recent videos in the comments. So make sure you check that. But thank you, brothers, for coming up in here.
Thank you, brother.
Dang. All right, man. Appreciate you. I'm going to take you down. And brother BGS, as usual, it's always a pleasure and an honor. So thank you for coming through, man.
No, anytime, man. My time is your time, Doc.
Well,
we're gonna get that name change for the T and then change it to Truth, okay?
Oh, man.
Get you a shield. Get that man a shield.
Artists will be killing me. But I appreciate you, man. Thank you. All right. I'm gonna pull you down, though, all right?
All right.
All right. So here's the thing. As usual, we have an office hours. We're going to chop it up for about an hour after this live broadcast. Give me about 5 or so minutes, 10 at the most to set up the link. And this is for my Patreon and YouTube members. You can come in, depending on what level of membership you have, you can communicate in the comments, or you can come up onto the screen and we can dialogue. But like I said, we're doing that for about an hour after the show. And mainly, tonight I'm going to be kind of getting through it as quickly as I can, because I pressure cooked a roast this evening and I'm got to serve dinner. But I want to thank you guys for participating. Appreciate that support, Tim. I want to thank you guys for participating and engaging this. And I'm going to go ahead, and y'all know how I like to close it out. We're going to do it right, though. And I'm going to put this on the screen because I want brothers to have access to it. And I want us to be able to share the message of it. As a matter of fact, let me see. Let me go ahead and put it there. So, brothers, be reminded that we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, brainless henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, warriors, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who would genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic, selfish, and unrealistic needs. You define your worth, brothers. Peace.